Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you. His name is David Aizuss. He is a seasoned financial professional dedicated to helping individuals navigate the intricacies of student loans. With a background as a commercial real estate appraiser from 2017 through 2020, David developed a sharp eye for financial nuances and honed his analytical skills. Since 2021, David has been making a significant impact as a mortgage loan officer. His journey in the mortgage industry showcases his commitment to guiding clients through the complexities of financial decisions, solidifying his reputation as a trusted advisor. As a student loan advisor, David brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. His experience in both commercial real estate and mortgage lending uniquely positions him to offer comprehensive insights into financial planning. And today we're going to talk about student loans, amongst other things. And I'm really excited about that. So welcome to the podcast, David. I'm delighted to have
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. We're going to nerd out about student loans and
Yeah.
I'll try to keep it as entertaining as possible.
Okay, well, yeah, if we can make student loans entertaining, but I think you can make anything entertaining, right? I talked to Megan about student loans, if anybody that listens to the podcast remembers, and that was in 2023. So I thought we would have David on to tell us what has changed and give us some advice on how to help us with our student loans, either the ones that we're paying off or the ones that we're eventually going to take out. So I'm excited about this. So, David, my first question to all my guests is to tell me their story. Like, how did you end up being a nerd in dealing with money?
Yeah, well, so I'll tell you my story and I'll also tell you how I became a nerd in dealing with money. I think I've
Okay.
always been a nerd in dealing with money, to be honest.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, like when I was like 12 years old, after I had just started playing guitar, actually. So, other sidebar, I'm also a musician, so
Oh,
always
I
be
love
more.
that. My kids are musicians.
Nice. I helped run a rock music school at one point, like a school of rock type of
Oh,
thing.
awesome.
So anyway,
That's cool.
that we'll get into that. But
All right.
so
I love that.
when I was young, I was so into money that like, oh, and it wasn't because I loved money, it was because I realized it was a tool to accomplish X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
So one of my first financial goals was buy a nice guitar because, I started with a little beater, $20 guitar hand me down from my dad, right? And then,
Right.
I had spent the summer between somewhere around age 12 and 13, washing cars in the neighborhood, just door knocking, being like, no, knowing that hey, I'm a cute kid. No one's gonna turn me
They're
down
not
to
gonna
wash their,
they're not gonna
yeah.
decline.
Yeah, so I was like, hey, I'll wash your car for $10, even though I was terrible at cleaning cars. I have soap stains and everything.
Yeah, there's a
And
skill to that.
yeah, and I didn't have it. And saving up for the guitar, I would like it was around my birthday too, and so people would give me before playing guitar, I was into video games, and so people would give me like GameStop gift cards to buy
Okay.
video
Yeah.
games. And here's where I guess like my first like I loved like financial loopholes was I was like, I don't value this gift card because I'm trying to buy a guitar.
I
I'm
need
not trying
cash.
to buy exactly. I need cash. And so I went into the local GameStop and was like, hey, can I trade this in for cash? It's $50 on a gift card. It should be worth $50. And they were like, no, you can't do that. But then I was like, what's your return policy on video games? And they said, if you return a video game within 7 days, you can get a full refund for the video game. And so
Boom.
I was like, okay. So then I just like tried to max out the card as much as possible by buying like two or three different video games, paid for it with the card, walked out of the door, came back in 2 seconds later and was like, hey, I'd like to return these for cash.
Oh my gosh.
And
And they didn't call you out, huh?
well, they thought it was hilarious because it's like this 12-year-old kid doing it. But that was like my first, I guess, like, oh, financial planning type of thing, right?
Okay. I love
Um,
that.
And, through the year, eventually, I wasn't interested in anything in school other than economics. Had a really good high school econ professor. Shout out to Mr. Doche. And went to school for econ. Did that. And then after graduating with an econ degree way back when, became a commercial real estate appraiser. So think valuation of big commercial buildings, 2 to 300 page investment report writing for banks, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Because I'm the type of guy who thinks that, a 50 tenant office building discounted cash flow analysis in Excel is super fun. I'm just kidding.
Exciting, huh? Ooh.
Well, I still think that stuff's kind of cool. And I remember showing my wife my reports that I was making at one point, being like, look at what I made. And she'd be like, that's disgusting. And I'm like, well, you stick your hands up butts. She's a veterinarian.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, "Oh." So, but one thing so did that for a bunch of years, learned a ton, cut my teeth in finance that way, helped run a music school along the way because I didn't like school. I had to work. So that's a whole other story. But after a few years, eventually COVID hit, right? And I can't believe that was over 5 years ago. But what
I
was, you
know.
know,
It's crazy.
yeah, what was due for the bank in 4 weeks became due in 2 weeks, right? And the pay got cut. So I was pulling all-nighters pretty regularly. It was unsustainable. I might as well have been an ER vet. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't be any type of doctor. I'd be a horrible doctor. But it was unsustainable for me. And so one thing led to another, became a mortgage loan officer, as you stated in the bio. So helping people buy, sell, refinance, accomplish their real estate goals. Really liked that because it was actually helping, a person, not a bank, a person accomplish a goal. And that goal just
Right.
happened to be buy the first home, buy the second home, buy the first investment property, whatever. Right. Um,
Right.
and I enjoyed that because one, it was working with people doing financial problem solving, but I do think real estate can be a good wealth building tool. It's not the only one. Not everybody needs to do it, and there's definitely wrong ways to do it, despite what Instagram and TikTok should say. But it can be great. So I've done over 100 transactions on that side, but now 100% of my time is just spent on pure fiduciary financial planning and student loan consulting. Um, because I had always wanted to be a fiduciary financial planner. It's just, way back when you graduate with an econ degree, most places wouldn't hire you unless you had 5+ years experience. And
Right.
so
Right.
how do you get 5+ years experience if you need 5+ years of experience to get the experience? I was like, this doesn't make any sense. So I
Right.
leveraged the relationships that I found through being a music teacher and helping run a music school to get me the financial analyst role for a commercial real estate firm, basically. That's a whole other story for another time. Um, but along the way, became a student loan consultant for SLP, student loan planner, and also now financial planner, specializing in working with veterinarians. Because I
Oh,
was
okay. So because your wife's a veterinarian, is that why you lean towards that?
Exactly. And
Okay.
so we market the heck out of it. I'm very self-aware, but it's true. I've been with her for over 15 years. I saw her go to vet school. She went to K-State. So I remember living with her, fourth year during her rotation year. Living in like a 250 square foot studio apartment next to the university, and her coming home at like 2 in the morning from anesthesiology rotation. Vet school was a crazy period of time. She had a good time
Yes.
though. And I've seen her work at multiple different practices since then. So I've seen what a well-oiled machine looks like in the vet world, and what a not well-oiled machine looks like, and everything in between. And so now I've worked with on both the student loan consulting side and the financial planning side. Small MLGP associates, associates who do part-time reliefing, full-time relief vets, ER vets, large animal vets, mixed practice vets, practice owners, specialties, you name it. And so, and the reason for specializing in that is one, obviously I'm biased because of my wife, but I like working with you guys the most. You guys are fun to
Because we're
work with.
good people,
Uh,
right?
because you are genuine, no BS, good people. Right.
Right.
And so I usually really hit it off with vets. And then two, there's only so much I can learn, right? And a veterinarian has a very specific set of opportunities and pitfalls to look out for. Same thing with a Fortune 500 CEO. Same thing with an attorney, right?
Right.
And so, if there's only so much time in the day for me to learn, um, I should probably I could also probably make more money if I just specialize in working with the people that I like the most and know the most about, and just
Right.
be really, 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 really good at that, as opposed
That
to trying to
niche.
learn
Yeah.
everything, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so there you go.
I love that. I love that story. Well, I'm glad your wife's a veterinarian because veterinarians are the best people. I always
They
say
are.
that in the podcast. Not tooting my own horn, but just in general, all the veterinarians are wonderful. So, okay, so where do we want to start? Do we want to start with student loans or do you have another idea?
I think, you know what? Let's start with student loans. That's probably what they're tuning in for.
Yeah, that's what I
Ask
think. There's a lot
ask
of
me
people
anything.
that are struggling with that subject. So, what's changed, I guess, since I talked to Megan in 2023? Probably a lot of things, right?
Oh, geez. Okay, so since 2023, what has happened? Timeline, the IDR waiver happened, and so that technically happened during that, and the main cutoff dates were end of June 2024 slash going into September 2024. And what do I mean by that? Well, here's what the IDR waiver what
But
well, here's the
IDR
old
said
rules.
IDR is income driven repayment, right?
You got it.
Okay, just want to
Um,
say that for people that don't know all the
and
little
and it
initials.
Yeah, and all things finance, we've got to put acronyms to everything to make us sound smarter, I think. But
We relate to that.
sometimes they call it the IDR waiver. It's sometimes called the one-time account adjustment. It had a few different names, but what happened was it was basically a new set of rules. Old school rules, it was, oh, if you had ever consolidated in the past your federal student loans, and all consolidation means in federal student loan world is you're taking a group of loans and smushing them together into one new big loan with a new total balance and takes a weighted average interest rate. So it doesn't on paper really change much, but you're taking like 20 different loans, for example, and smushing them all into one big loan. That's it. Different than private refinancing, which would be taking it out of the federal loan system and into the private
Okay.
world.
Okay, so
Um,
one's with the Fed and one's without.
Yep.
Okay.
And so consolidation in the federal world, it again is just smushing loans together. And the old rules, how it used to work, is if you had consolidated in the past and you were going for loan forgiveness, so that 20 or 25-year timeline or 10 years for public service loan forgiveness, PSLF. So we'll talk about all those nuances in a minute. But if
Okay.
you were going for forgiveness and you were on that forgiveness timeline, if you consolidated in the past, you'd have to be very careful because the rules were it would restart your clock to zero. So if you were 10 years in and you consolidated, start at zero now. The IDR waiver, it had a few different things about it, but the biggest part about it was is if you had consolidated before June 30th, 2024. And it gets a little gray area, but it was most likely if you had applied to consolidate before then, and if the consolidation went through before the end of September, like the loan dispersed, then that's not going to happen anymore. You're not going to restart your credit. What will happen is they will take whatever individual loan had the highest payment credit on it and count that as your credit on the entire consolidation loan. So in practice, here's what that could look like. Oh, what if someone took out different groups of loans in different periods of time?
Right.
Because maybe they went to undergrad, took a break, went to vet school, took a break, right?
Right.
Um, Maybe vet school's their or being a veterinarian is their second career, and so there was a big gap between undergrad and vet school, right? Um, there's different, you could see how there's different scenarios where people would have different groups of loans taken out at vastly different periods of time. And so maybe that group of undergrad loans have like, I don't know, 15 years worth of payments on it. And then what if the majority of their balance, though, wasn't left over from undergrad? Those are almost paid off, but then they went to vet school, med school, whatever. And so they have new loans and they just graduated with zero payment history on it. but that's the
Right.
majority of their balance because, well, as we know, vet school is generally more expensive than undergrad, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And so, what if you had one old loan with 200 payments made on it, and then more than half of your loan balance with no payments made on it, or 50 payments made on it? If you had consolidated before that cutoff date, you would get 200 on your entire balance now. You
Mm,
just fast tracked forgiveness on the majority of your loans by like 10 plus years.
wow.
That's insane,
Yeah.
right? So that was the IDR waiver one-time account adjustment thing that happened between 2023 and the middle of 2024. Okay.
Okay.
And it was less headliney because as you could probably tell from my explanation, it's kind of complicated.
Well,
Right?
right. Yeah, I'm having a hard time following it. I get it, but yeah, it is
Yeah.
complicated.
It's not as easy as we have this new save plan and it's so good. It's harder to attack because you've got to first understand it and then
Right.
figure out oh, this actually has pretty big
Nuances.
implications.
Right.
Um, Now, after that happened, um, and what the current quote rules are now for consolidation is even if you miss the cutoff date, it's supposed to take a weighted average credit. So if you had like 100 payments on 50% of your loans and zero on the other 50%, well, weighted average of that would be 50. Okay. So
Gotcha.
it's not
Mhm.
supposed to start you at zero anymore. However, be careful about we can get into strategy later, but just be careful about consolidating now. There's some people who should, there's some people who they might want to wait, even if it would be mathematically beneficial, and there's some people who specifically shouldn't. So now it's a little bit more complicated. But either way, that's the new rules for consolidation post that waiver date, weighted average allegedly. And something else that has happened that probably most of your listeners, or at least some of your listeners, are aware of is Save got attacked, right?
Right. Right.
And so around July of 2024, the Eighth Circuit, a very conservative court, attacked Save. And so this is before even the election. So it was a bit of a surprise too. It was before
Right.
Trump won.
Okay.
Um, and what happened is at some point between June and July, August of 2024, everybody who was already in the save plan got put in an administrative forbearance with no payment due. But the catch, unlike COVID forbearance, which did count towards people's forgiveness timelines, this administrative forbearance that you're forced into because you were in save, because the courts were attacking save, does not count towards any forgiveness timeline. So so everybody's in limbo in save right now, and people are still in it today. Like it has lasted almost a year now, which is insane.
Okay.
Um, Now, again, we can talk
So
strategy in a minute, but
can you tell me, for people that don't know, maybe, can you tell me
Mhm.
what the savings on valuable education, something like that, right?
I don't even know. I just know the
Okay.
acronyms.
So save, tell me what that means for people that aren't in it, so that people understand
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
So the save plan was a new income-driven repayment. So let me back up
Okay.
to get the forgiveness. So for loan forgiveness, the way it works is you're either on a 20 or 25-year timeline,
Right.
depending on the particular income-driven repayment plan you're on. Okay.
Okay.
So the IDR, income-driven repayment plan, is the umbrella term. Okay.
Gotcha.
Um, Public service loan forgiveness just makes that 20 or 25-year term 10. Unfortunately, for 90 plus percent of vets, I don't know the actual numbers, but for the majority of vets, we're not talking about PSLF.
Right.
Um, the only people who are going for PSLF and vet med are usually shelter med, university professors, lab vets, if you work for a 501(c)(3) not for profit. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
So if you're outside of those, you probably aren't eligible or going for PSLF,
Okay.
which
So
is
now you're at 20
most
to
vets.
20 or 25 years under save.
Yes.
Okay.
Save was a new IDR plan that was made from the Biden administration. It didn't previously exist before that.
Gotcha.
Um, and it was a quote better plan. It was more favorable in that, oh, it took because the way these IDR plans work is it takes your income, which is supposed to be your adjusted gross income, which is supposed to be line 11 on your personal tax return. There are other ways to show income, but let's just use that as the standard.
Right.
Takes that number and then minus, you subtract out of it some version of the federal poverty line for your household size. Okay. And then, and by some version, I mean sometimes they just use the actual poverty level of around 15,000 for a single person, right? For one of the plans. Some
Hmm.
plans use 150% of that number. And
Okay.
Save, one difference it did is it used 225% of the federal
Yeah.
poverty line.
Okay.
So it takes more out of your income, okay,
Gotcha.
on paper. And
Right.
then that adjusted income number, your AGI minus your, that version of the poverty line for that plan,
Right.
they're going to take that number and multiply it by some percent, okay? Some plan, there's one plan that does 20%, there's another one that does 15, there's others that do 10. Save was tied for the lowest at 10%. So we had 220% of the federal poverty line and 10% of that number. And divide that by 12, that's your minimum monthly payment. And so because Save took the most out of your income because of the highest version of the poverty level and
Right.
also the lowest percent of
Cent.
that income,
Gotcha.
it would always result, I'd say 99% of the time because there's some fringe scenarios that are weird. It would 99% of the time result in the lowest monthly payment.
Right.
It had some other provisions where it was like post July of 2024, which didn't end up happening because that's exactly when it was attacked. But
Yeah.
post that date, it was supposed to be 5% of income
Mm.
for undergrad loans only.
Oh,
So don't feel bad about losing out on that, like Save going away for the majority of this audience because most, for at least a lot of the veterinarians I work with, 99%, if not 100% of their loans are from vet school, right?
right. Right. The
Um,
big
so that
chunks. Yeah.
so that benefit really only helped a lot of non-professionals, honestly.
Okay.
It wasn't going to make a huge difference for most vets,
For
but
us.
still, that is by far the lowest monthly payment compared to all the other plans, 5% and 225% versus 10 and 150 for the next best one.
Okay.
Um, for not, if you had any loans that aren't from undergrad, so vet school loans, it's 25 years, not 20. So it really liked undergrad loans, but still probably also the lowest monthly payment for even grad school or vet school or med school for a lot of professionals too.
Right.
Um, so that's what Save was.
Okay.
The
But
core,
it's gone.
but it's gone. Or
Okay.
rather, it's in limbo. Where we're at now is even if you're listening to this and you wanted to apply for Save, they took it off the application now, like the income-driven repayment
Oh,
applications.
right.
Um, it still exists in that anybody who was on it is in forbearance right now. Um, and so the question for a lot of people today is if you were on Save, should you stay on it and wait for it to officially die in the courts? Or should you try to switch now? And whether you decide to wait and be forced into repayment again, or try to switch now, um, you know, what's your plan B?
Right.
And so, regardless of your timing, you should probably know, hey, and this is what we do in student loan consults and what I do for all my financial planning clients is let's figure out, regardless of all the drama going on right now, should you pay off your loans, treat it like an auto loan, or go for forgiveness? What's the best version of both? Forget the rest. Whatever saves the most money, do that,
That's the
right?
way you go. Right.
Yeah. And now payoff is really easy to model because, well, if you were going to pay off let's say you had a vet with a 300 grand loan balance. Okay. Um, the best version of paying that off in the realm of just a straight calculator would be, oh, what if we could cut a check today for 300,000? Because then the interest rates don't matter because no more further interest accrued. And so if we
Right.
couldn't cut a check today for 300K, then it's that plus whatever interest is, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so it wouldn't cost less than 300,000 in that example. All right, cool. Then what I do is move on to forgiveness, in which case we'd want to see how much credit do you have. That's step one, because
Hmm.
most of your listeners are probably not at zero. Some might be if they just graduated, but
Right.
some,
Yeah,
but a
very
lot
new.
aren't just, yeah. So you might hear these 20 or 25-year timelines and think that's a ton of time, but you
Right.
might be 5 to 10 years into it already, or even more.
Right.
Um, in which case, sometimes going for forgiveness once you figure it out might actually be faster to getting rid of the loans than trying to
Sure.
pay it off
Pay it
aggressively.
off. Yeah.
Um,
Depending on where you're at.
yeah, and so what we want to do is figure out, hey, if not save, what's your plan B? And then figure out, hey, depending on your income, do we need to do a tax extension next year? Should we specifically not? Should we do married filing jointly or married filing separately if you're married? If you're a community property state like California, where I'm at, that works different, sometimes for the better, actually. But also, it's still, even in a not community property state, many times still makes sense to do married filing separate. But sometimes it specifically doesn't. It gets complicated because there's usually a cost of doing married filing separate. And that depends on what's your income and what's your spouse's income, and what state you're in. And so what we got to figure out is, okay, what should your optimum tax filing status be? What should your tax planning be for the following year? Like taking an extension, doing an amendment, or specifically not doing any of that fancy stuff, because it doesn't always make sense to do that. Um, and how should we recertify next if and when that happens? Like, should we use a tax return? Should we use alternative form of documentation? It can get complicated, right? This is not, last time I checked, none of that had to do with like paying my mortgage, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and
Very cool.
so there's 20 different way combinations, 20 plus different combinations and permutations. And so my job is to figure out what combination saves you the most money depending on your unique scenario. Do that. And so for a lot of vets, that is pursuing forgiveness. Not always, but for a lot of vets, it does involve that.
Right.
Um, and so that's where we're at today is a lot of people are in limbo right now, and they've got to figure out, regardless of if they want to try to implement the plan now or wait for them to be officially kicked off of save, um, what's your plan B?
Right. And you don't think forgiveness is going to go away,
No,
like altogether. That program
no.
isn't going to go in the trash.
No.
Okay.
But take this with some grain of salt in that I guess anything could happen, right? If they change the laws to allow murder to happen, then I guess murder is legal now, right? So like
Right.
technically anything could
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of chaos in this new administration, and lots of unclearness and lots of things changing and then taking back. And then for like half a second, we thought that they were taking away the ability to do married filing separate, but it turns out that was a mistake. And so they corrected that 2 days later. And so there's a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
But
There, it
mm,
changes every day, it seems, right
yeah,
now. Things are all
yeah.
over the place right now.
So hashtag don't sue me, but my opinion is no, the ability to go for forgiveness is not going to go away. Now there are some things that are more protected than others. For example, IBR, that plan, income-based repayment, is in the statute. And so the most conservative version of that plan, it would take 60 votes in the Senate to get rid of, and no one's trying to get rid of that old version of IBR, right? Um, the there's a scary bill going on right now that has some interesting provisions, including the GOP's version of an income-driven repayment plan called the RAP plan. I'm not going to go into detail about it today because it's just a bill. And so it will, if it does, one, it might not even pass at all. And even if it does, the Senate's probably going to change it 1,000 times. And so probably don't lose any sleep over it yet, but they've got a potential new plan coming out. Um, and so long term, things can change along the way, and your strategy might change along the way. But are they just going to blanket get rid of forgiveness? Um, they can't unless some other crazy stuff happened, but nobody's trying to, as
Yeah,
far
because I
as
think a lot of people were afraid of that for a while, is that, or at least that was the line that was being put out there, is they're going to take away forgiveness, and then all these people that have been on it for 10 or 15 years are going to get screwed.
Yeah, well, there was another scary thing that happened a few months ago, in that like they were revamping the online IDR application, which also involved how to recertify your income because in any of these IDR plans, you have to recertify your income once a year, typically. Now, we've not been used to that because no one had to do it in COVID, and then they kicked the can down the curb a few times after that too. But we got to a point where people were hitting that deadline to recertify. They took the applications down so they couldn't recertify. So the
Oh,
servicers were reaching out to people to recertify and they physically couldn't. And so what happens? Well, generally, what's supposed to happen if you don't recertify your income by the deadline, show updated income documentation to your loan servicer, is that they would punish you by kicking you off the IDR plan into something like the standard 10-year plan, which is what's the amount to that mathematically repays your loans in 10 years.
mm,
Sometimes the servicers did even more aggressive than that, but that number is roughly 1% of your balance. So if you have a 300 grand loan balance that rates between 5 and 7%, that payment could be 3 to 4 grand a month, depending on the
yeah.
interest rates. Yikes.
Yeah, that would
That's
hurt.
more that's more than a lot of mortgage payments, right?
Yeah, a lot more.
And so people were afraid that forgiveness was going away and that the sky was falling, but it was really just a technical glitch of, hey, they were trying to revamp the application at the time when, probably 20% of people were just happened to need to recertify, and then that happened.
And it just kind of
The
crashed.
application's back up again. They
Okay.
fixed it.
We don't have to worry
Um,
about that anymore.
yeah, but to answer your question, no, I don't think forgiveness just in general is going away, um, even though things are very tumultuous right now.
Okay. So let me ask you this question because I've got a couple scenarios for you. The first one would be if you just graduated from vet school this year
Hmm.
and now you're just out because they just graduated, what, a week or so ago.
Hmm.
How would you propose that they start down this road to decide what they're going to do with their student loans?
Good question. I'm gonna hashtag don't sue me because I'm not looking at your data, right? I'm not
Right,
taking
right.
your
Yeah, we
x-rays,
understand that it's an
but
individual thing, right?
yeah.
But just in general, because a lot of people, they get out of school, they've got undergrad loans, they've got vet school loans, and they're just like lost. They don't know what to do. And they're kind of at the mercy of just trying to figure it out if they don't have a financial advisor. And obviously, that's part of your answer, I imagine. But just in
Yeah.
general, what would you recommend that they do?
Shameless plug. Step one, reach out to me and then let's
Yeah,
let's do some
get an
analysis.
advisor, right? Which always makes
But
sense.
Here's if you don't want to do that, here's some general guidance that's very common to new grads,
Okay.
and a strategy that you might want to consider. Um, just to make it simple, let's say in this scenario they don't have any undergraduate loans, or if they do, there's like very little credit on them. They went straight from undergrad into vet school, and so they didn't make any payments on their undergrad loans because it all stayed in school deferment along the way
Right,
with no
right.
payment due. So, okay, if that's you and you're starting at zero and you've determined that it might make sense to go for forgiveness over payoff because that would save you 50, 100 grand, whatever, something substantial.
Whatever the numbers say, yeah.
Cool. If you just graduated, especially once you're past your conferral date, meaning like the degree is yours, you're done. Your loans are now in grace period, not an in-school deferment anymore. Because usually,
Right,
if you do nothing after graduation, just there's 6 months of nothing on your loans
right.
um, before you have to pick a payment plan.
Okay.
And most people just do that by default. But here's the missed opportunity. You probably didn't make any money in vet school. Or if you did, you probably made less than 30K. And if you didn't, I'd be very surprised, right?
Surprise,
That's
right. Most
very
people
impressive.
don't work, yeah.
And so you probably made zero to very little income in vet school. And so what if you, after you're out of in-school deferment and in that grace period, what if you consolidated your loans? And when you consolidate, it forces you to pick a repayment plan 6 months sooner than you otherwise would.
Hmm,
Oh, well, if you're going to go for forgiveness and you then pick an IDR plan, then hey, you're going to show no income, right?
nice, yeah.
Now, that also means if you're about to graduate, it makes sense to, even if you have zero income, to sometimes file a tax return. You don't have to, but hey, that's a really good way to show on paper that you made $0, right?
Okay. I love
And
that.
even if you didn't, you might be in between, you might not have your next job set up, in which case you can put on the application that you've made no taxable income and that you
Right.
don't have a job yet.
Right.
But either way, there's this period of time where you are being 100% truthful and you didn't make any money.
Right.
Cool. So you apply for an IDR plan, regardless of the one, but you'd want to pick the quote best one for you, which we do in our analysis. But in any one, if you have zero income times X percent is $0 payment, right?
Right.
And so, it now puts you in repayment. Now, the consolidation generally takes 1 or 2 months, but still, we're at, maybe 2 months out instead of 6 months out, and we're in repayment, not in grace period anymore. And we
Right.
locked in a $0 payment for a year. So now you're racking
Taking
up
time.
forgiveness credit
Right.
exactly,
Okay.
while not paying anything,
Right.
as opposed to not paying anything for 6 months, but not racking up credit.
Sure. Yeah, I love that.
And then what if you really didn't strategize, stayed in grace period for 6 months, you didn't take a tax extension, now your next year's tax return is available and it has at least half a year's of earnings on it as a vet. Then you use that to get in the IDR plan. It still would be a pretty low payment, but it ain't gonna be zero,
Right.
probably.
Right.
So, there's quite a bit of money to save the first few years out of, like, when you're just graduating if you strategize right. Um, like a lot of money actually, because then
Yeah.
hey, so let's say you do that and you lock in a payment for $0 for a year. Most people graduate vet school in like May or June, right?
Sure.
And then so let's say we do that, and then let's say this time next year it's asking for updated income documentation again, right? Because usually it's supposed to do it once a year when the system's working, which right now it's hasn't, but they're trying to, right? Um,
Right.
cool. If you do nothing, then by then, we're in May, June of 2026 now. The tax day, like when you're supposed to file your tax return, is April 15th, right? And so if you did nothing, uh, this time next year, you would have been done with your 2025 tax return. And most vets would have then shown, I don't know, half a year's worth of income, which depends on if you're a large animal, small animal, ER,
How much
what
that will be. Yeah.
doing a rotating internship, right? So it's different for everybody. But let's say you're making, 140K a year outside, as a small animal GP first year out of practice. Well, then you might show 70 grand of income, in which case that would be what you'd use to based off of the next year's of payments on. But if you took a tax extension, and so which makes it so you don't have to file your return until October,
Mm.
then cool, the still most recent tax return at that time would be 2024's return when they're asking for it, which would show little to no income. And so depending on how this administration works, so far that's been a viable strategy, and that it just gives you the option to potentially reuse an older tax return again if that would be more favorable to you, right?
Right.
And no guarantees because of this new administration, but that is a common strategy, and it has worked.
Yeah.
No
And then
guarantees that it'll continue to work.
you're 2 years into your deferment before you're really even paying any money.
Yeah, so now that
Very nice.
20. And if you're just graduating, your loans are probably new enough where we're on what's called new IBR, not old IBR.
Hmm.
If you're There's a certain cutoff date where if your loans are not older than, if your loans are 20, okay, I'd have to look at the exact date. I have a cheat sheet in my consulting, but it's, I think somewhere in the middle of 2024 onwards. If you don't have any loans prior to this cutoff date and they're all from post that date, so if
Yes.
all your loans are from 2015 onwards and you didn't have any loans prior to that, it's a 20-year timeline for quote the best plan, not 25,
Okay.
even in worst case scenario. And then it's like, oh, if you're 2 years in, now you're at 18 years left and you haven't paid anything.
Right.
Ooh, that's pretty
Yeah.
good. And then, hey, you might want to file another tax extension the following year, depending on what if your income continued to go up, because now you can reserve that year tax return that showed half a year's of income, not a full year of income. Does
Right.
that mean everybody should file a tax extension? No, because eventually your income will stabilize and then it will be
I'll
not
catch up
worth the
to you.
hassle.
Yeah.
And then what if your income went down a year following that because you got pregnant and went on maternity leave,
Right.
right? There
Yeah.
might be a reason that even if you then go back to work, there might be a reason that a following year's return would actually show less income.
Right.
Would you want to file a tax extension the next year after that? Probably not. We'd want
Yeah.
that lower return, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of what ifs, but the to answer your original question for just the new grad starting out, you you'll want to look through your NSLDS file, the thing that shows all your loan history, but really consider consolidating to force yourself into repayment on potentially a $0 per month payment to start racking up credit sooner than you otherwise would, and to
Right.
lock in a no payment too. So that
Oh,
makes life easier as
yeah,
well.
that's great advice. I love that. Okay. So what if you're, this is my second scenario. What if you are a student that's
Mhm.
been through undergrad and now you're starting vet school? Do you have any advice for them on how to take out loans in the best way so they have less to pay off when they get to the end, or is there no tricks to that?
Here's some general, so I'll get into some spicy stuff at the end of this answer. Here's the normal way you want to think about it, at least as of like, prior to a month ago, which might still be the way to think about it. Um, you want to max out your federal student loans first before you ever think about taking private loans out.
Okay.
Okay. Some people, for some reason, just go straight to private loans before maxing out the federal side. The reason you want to do that is because, well, private student loans, um, they don't have these income-driven repayment plan options. They don't
Right.
have forgiveness options. It's just basically a car loan. Like it
Right.
works the same way.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just less options. You're gonna have to repay it. And if you're worried about interest rates, well, hang on. Even if you are gonna pay off the loans, what if let's say you're going straight into vet school, what if 4 years from now they come out with super safe?
Right.
Ooh. And so maybe current version you weren't gonna go for forgiveness, but what if the next administration comes out with something even better?
Right.
And
Yeah,
you
because you
just
never know what they're going to do, right?
You never know what you're going to do. So you might as well keep the option open. And hey, if rates go back down to 3% because we have another COVID, I don't think they're going to go back down to that. But still,
Right.
it's like you could always private refinance your federal loans once you're working outside of vet school, right?
Decide to do
Um,
that. Yeah.
as long as you keep good credit and work and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, if it did make sense to go private, you can always do that in the future. Now be very careful because you can't go back. Once you go private and refi it, you can't go back. So you'd want to
Right.
measure twice, cut once, right?
Okay.
But it's just, oh, start out maxing out the federal benefit first to give you the option of once you graduate and you know what life looks like and you know what plans look like in the future because they could change again over the next 4 years. Um, cool, good thing you left the option open if one of those plans was super financially beneficial to you. And if it wasn't and you know you're going to go for payoff because you run the numbers and interest rates drop, then great. Then you could private refi at that time, right? But if you just go
Right.
private on the onset, you don't have you're just limiting your
You're
options
kind of
and you might be
stuck.
leaving
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So that's guidance number one is max out the federal side if you can first before you look at supplementing it with any private loans.
Right.
um, Something to just keep an eye out. I don't want to scare anybody, but there's a bill going on right now which might not even pass, and even if it does pass will probably be changed like 50,000 times before anything is
Or it
actually
gets through.
passed.
Yeah, that's how it works.
One of the scary things for new grads, so this doesn't impact any vet who's already practicing, um, but one scary thing is that they said they were capping or they wanted to cap borrowing limits um, to $150,000.
Because
Most
they're trying to get the colleges to make college cheaper, probably, right? Or that's what they think
uh,
is going to happen.
that's beyond my pay grade, what their intended consequences of that.
Right,
That
but
might be one of
that's
them.
people aren't going to be able to go to vet school or medical school or anything if they do that.
Yeah, my first reaction to that was, okay, I guess we're just not going to have any doctors of any kind anymore, right?
Right,
And it's scary because do you think I don't think anybody actually thinks the tuition would just drop instantly.
right. No, of
Um,
course it wouldn't.
and so a lot of people would just have to look to the private sector for loans. Well,
Right,
here's here's the problem with that is sometimes, usually, you need income to qualify. You need income and good credit to qualify
sure.
for a private loan,
Yeah, or
right?
something to put up for collateral or something.
Yeah, and so, well, most people going into vet school don't have any collateral, and that's not how student loans work. Like they're not going to
Right.
ask for your car, right?
Yeah. Anyway.
Um, and what if you don't have a cosigner? Like, what if you don't have a good cosigner?
Right.
Because that's usually how you would get it if you don't have any income because you're going to vet
Sure.
school, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you'd have
Um,
your parents sign or somebody else. Yeah.
And so for those who don't have, and so even if you do have a good cosigner, if it forces you to get more private loans, again, it's less options in the future, and interest rates right now aren't cheap, right? And
Very high.
so it either just makes it more costly for people going to vet school, or just it hurts your ability to go in the first place because what if you can't get the private loan to supplement the difference?
Right.
A lot of, I'd say the vast majority of vet, not all, if you got in school tuition, right, for vet school, like you can keep it in the hundreds of thousands, like in with a one in front of it. Um, but I'd say at least the vast majority of the vets that I work with, there's over 200,000 in federal student loans.
Sure.
Um, and like so, and it's not uncommon that it's 3 to 500,000.
I know.
That's
Bad
not
picture.
uncommon at all.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's like it's scary because does it just mean it's 10 times harder to go to vet school now or any medical
Any
profession?
medical school. Yeah.
I don't
Possibly.
want to scare anybody, but that's just something
Right.
to be aware
Right.
of and keep an eye out. I don't think, maybe I'm just being hopeful, but I really don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It
I
would
don't
be
think,
hard. There would be a lot of people that would fight it, I think, and that's probably why it wouldn't happen.
yeah, universities are pretty powerful and they have some swing. So I
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should before we get through our podcast?
I don't know. It just depends on how nerdy do you want me to be, right? Because I mentioned married filing separate earlier. That's a whole other can of worms.
Now, is
Um,
that for people that are like out of vet school, currently paying back their student loans? Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
sure. Most people, if you're married, most people by default just file jointly, married filing
Right.
joint.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, and I guess I'll take the sidebar to go through this because it might save your listeners a ton of money even just thinking about this idea and then
Okay.
going to do
Okay.
their own research. Um,
Right.
is most people default to doing married filing joint because it saves you the most in taxes. In fact, it almost never makes sense financially to do married filing separate. It either won't cost you anything most of the time. For 99% of scenarios, it either will cost you very little or it might cost you a lot in the form of owing more taxes than you otherwise would if you did
Right.
joint. So most people just don't do it because it's like there's almost never a win to it on the
Right.
tax side. Um, except for when you're you've got student loans and you're going for forgiveness and utilizing an IDR plan. Um,
Okay.
if you file married filing joint, it takes total household income, you
Right.
and your partner. If you do married filing separate in a not community property state, which is the majority of states, there's like 10-ish or so community property states, including California where I'm at. But for the almost 40 not community property states, um, it just excludes spousal income. Now, the bigger the difference between you and your spouse's income, like let's say someone makes 50 grand and the other spouse makes 500 grand, the bigger that difference, the more it costs to file separately because the more it kicks you into a less favorable tax bracket between the both of you guys. And so you might pay 10, $20,000 extra in taxes than you would have otherwise paid. Ooh, if the person with 500 grand income is excluding 50 grand of income, and that lowers their student loan payment by like, I don't know, a couple $100 a month, let's say, or $500 a month. Um, well, that's 6 grand a year. Is it worth paying $15,000 extra in taxes to save 6 grand in that year in student loans? No, you shouldn't
Right.
do married filing separate, right?
Okay.
But what if the cost of filing separately was $1,000? And what if you got to lower your student loan payment by $700 a month? Oh, does it make sense to pay $1,000 extra that year in taxes to save $700 a month times 12 months? Absolutely. No brainer, right?
Okay.
It'd be like $8,400 in savings for the year.
Sure.
On the
Yeah.
student loans minus $1,000 tax costs, net savings 7,400. So
Right.
this is another thing you want to think about is you want to do the cost benefit analysis of, hey, what's the impact to my student loans if I file separately, and what's the cost of filing separately? Is it worth it or is it not? And as you can see, there's plenty of times where it might be like literally like $10,000 in savings, and there are some times where it's like, no, don't do it, right?
Oh,
Um, in a community property state, it gets even more complicated, but sometimes for the better, because when you file separately in a community property state, it's supposed to have, if you do it correctly, because a lot of people screw it up, so use a good accountant. Um, it's supposed to average your incomes on paper. So if somebody made 200 grand, the other person made 100K, you file separately. In California, for example, it's supposed to be 150K and 150K, and you still get to
gotcha.
exclude the spouse's income.
Right.
So, ooh, there's a lot of different scenarios where it's like you might really want to think about that.
Yeah.
It gets complicated, but just knowing, I think just knowing that it's something if you're married and you have student loans and your partner doesn't, because what if you both have student loans? That's a
Right.
whole other can of worms I'm not going to get into, because it can get pretty complicated. But a lot of it's pretty common that I think a lot of your listeners will have student loans and their spouse might have little or none, in which case, again, really want to think about should I do married filing separate next year or not, especially with all the uncertainty right now, um, with student loans in general. You want to make sure you're ready for plan A, plan B, plan C, depending on how they exactly kill save and what the remaining options are going to be.
All right. That's a great answer. I love that. I never even thought about that. So I'm glad you said that because people can check into it now.
Yeah.
So tell everyone if they want to know more or they have questions or they want to get a good advisor that's familiar with veterinarians, where they find you and to ask questions or to get a consultation or
Super easy. If you have any questions, whether it be how do I do a student loan consult, or how do I get David, how do I work with you, or hey, even if you just want to nerd out about cats, I don't know, just
do you
shoot
have
me an
cats at
email.
your house? How many cats?
We have okay, so we have two cats,
Okay.
both rescues. Um, One was a rescue that my wife did took a couple years off in between undergrad and vet school to be a vet tech, a vet
Okay.
assistant vet tech, and
Cool.
she rescued this feral cat that was plopped next to the clinic that she was working at the time. It was
Yeah.
probably like 2 or 3 days old,
Oh,
and it was a foster fail,
yeah. So she
and
bottle
it's
fed it and then couldn't get rid of it.
she did the bottle fed it,
I
waked
did
up
that a
every
few
couple
times.
hours. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And so it's her soulmate. And went to vet school with her and everything. And it
Love it.
hates because it's a feral cat. It hates everybody except for us.
Except her. Oh, he likes
So
you too.
well, she
See?
she yeah. So it's a girl feral cat. So it really hates everybody. Um,
Even
but she
worse.
yeah, she was iffy about me at first, and it took like 5 years of living with each other, but it's or I don't know how it took multiple years of living with each other, and
Yeah.
now she loves me.
Finally
Um,
won over. Okay, good.
yeah. And then the other cat we have is a what we think 19, because you don't exactly know. It's not like cats come with a tag that says here's how
That's
old
how
we
old
are,
they are.
right?
Right. Yeah.
But probably 19-year-old American bobtail
Cool.
that she rescued a bunch of years ago. She rescued when he was probably 15.
Wow.
Fast forward, she's a vet now, and a breeder brought the cat in, wanted to put the mate down, and needed to be put down, but the breeder said, "I don't want please put this cat down too. We have no use for him."
Oh,
And my wife was like, "We can't put that cat down.
right.
It's
For no
there's
reason.
nothing nothing medically wrong with him. He ate, he purred, just wanted, and
Yeah.
he was the sweetest cat."
Yeah.
And so one day she came home with this 15-year-old 18-pound fluff ball. And I was like, "What is that?" And now he's our best friend.
I love.
So yeah, if you want to reach out, my best email is very simple, David, so David, at slpwealth.com. So again, David at slpwealth.com. David at slpwealth or slpwealth.com. That's it.
I love.
So let me know if you have any questions, if you want to chat about cats, or if you want to chat about student loans, or if you want to chat about financial planning. I'm all ears.
You're all for all of it. I love it.
I'm all for all
Well,
of
this
it.
has been great. It wasn't nerdy at all, and it went by really fast. We when we first started, I said, "How long?" And he said, "Well, you don't want to go more than 30 minutes on finances," but I think we've been well over that. So, and hopefully we haven't lost too many listeners, but no, I think you did a great job. I love all the information that you shared, and I hope it helps someone out there.
Me too.
Sure it
My
will.
goal is that whether you work with me or not, that I can get the info to enough vets so that we can get vets as wealthy as possible. Because I think you guys are part of the most underappreciated group of people ever. It's one of the craziest professions ever. So, thank you for everything you guys
That's
do. Really.
absolutely true. Yeah, everybody out there, thank you for all the hard work that you do. So, everybody, this is David Aizuss. Did I
Nice.
say
Most
it
people get
right?
that wrong. Yes, you
I
did.
got it. All right, I got it. See, I'm usually bad at that, but I wanted to make sure I got it.
No,
So,
nailed it.
if you have any questions, reach out to him or reach out to me. And as always, thanks for listening. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye. Bye, David.
My pleasure. Thanks.